Um, are you
Keeps asking me for the same information on this private thing.
Yeah, that's what I had to do. I had to put it in twice.
okay?
It was odd.
Man, I just want to play this game. I got an email saying I got mail in my mail room. Ah,
Oh,
I think I limited hours too, but that's okay. I can always pick it up tomorrow. I have no idea what it is. Secret package. Let me check on Twitch on my phone just to see how we look like. Our microphone. Oh, I see Ian. Our microphone and speakers should be working well, so the audience will be able to hear me and everyone else through Zoom. Woot woot. Woot woot.
okay.
And everyone else. Okay, so looks like we're alive. Twitchy witchy girl. We can hear y'all, alright? Yeah, I say Adrian and Nikita. I think Adrian, she has privileges for as a Twitch moderator, so I think on Adrian's side she can let us know what happens on Twitch in the chat. Sharon also the same thing, and with Zoom. Alrighty.
My daughter's played this game. She'd be laughing at me right now if she
Yes.
saw that I was on here.
No, you're fine. This is all a learning experience. This is a panel and also a nice playthrough. It's all about education on both sides, both speakers and audience. Woohoo.
Hey, Jillian.
Who else needs to join?
Hey, Julian.
Do you have enough? 1, 2, 3,
Ian.
4, 5, 6.
Awesome. Thanks for being here with us.
Who else are we missing? I think that's it, right, Sarah? Just the 6 of us, or what other SAs are
Yeah.
playing with us? Okay. So when Sharn is ready to introduce us, we'll be playing the game.
So I don't. Awesome. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our event. Real quickly, I'm going to copy and paste the sign-in sheet to our Twitch and YouTube Live so that people can sign in.
Oopsies.
Yeah.
It is good. Really good.
Sarah, you guys didn't put another
Yeah,
code.
I'm putting a new code in the chat. Hold
So
on.
we didn't know this, but apparently if the game hasn't started yet, then it'll log us out. But don't worry, you guys didn't do anything wrong. Server's
Yeah,
gonna.
Sharon, just keep going. We'll get everybody
Yeah,
back on.
just good. Yeah, just keep
No
going, Sharon.
worries. Cool. My name is Sharon Bassey from the Office of Sustainability and SustainEastBay Club, and we've brought together gamers and panelists to talk about how sustainability relates to the virtual world and talk about developments in the tech industry and gaming. So let's go ahead and go around the panel and introduce ourselves, like your name, job title, and what you do, while Sarah goes ahead and gets the game code for us. Professor Pollock, why don't you get us started?
Okay. So my name is Ian Pollock. I teach at Cal State East Bay in the art department, and my areas of instruction and specialization are interaction design, game design, and areas related to sustainability and social justice within those two playable media.
Professor Brooks?
Hi. Yeah, it's great to be here. So I'm an associate professor in communication in the communication department at Cal State East Bay. And my areas of research are forecasting the future of media, game studies, and Afrofuturism and indigenous futurism. So,
Oh, nice.
Yep. It's all fun.
And then
Thanks.
Patrick.
Hi, my name is Patrick Kuznowski. I am the student engagement coordinator in student life and leadership programs. I coordinate leadership programming and I advise student organizations.
And then we have Kenrick.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kenrick Ali. I am the director for the University Unions and for Basync on campus.
All right, viewers, feel free to input any questions you have for our panel today into our chat on either the Twitch or YouTube Live, wherever you're watching from, and I can go ahead and ask them for you. So, is the game set up yet? Should I go ahead and ask questions?
We're just waiting on one more person to join.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
All right.
Good.
Wait, it's telling me that it closed the room.
Yeah, so we sent out a new code in the chat. I can send it again.
And this is like one of the incidents
it.
that Patrick shared
Got
earlier,
it.
where when one of us looked away and then the room closed. So yeah,
Oh,
this game
hold
can
on.
be strict.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, no, I learned about the multimedia from one of the zero waste game jams
All
I attended
right,
back
we're gonna
in
go ahead and
freshman.
start.
Let me make sure my audio is good.
Just let me know when you have to start.
We've started. You can go ahead and.
Very cool.
Yes.
All right, why don't we go ahead and get into it? Professor Pollock, tell us more about what you do here on campus and how you think your work relates to sustainability.
Okay, let me think about it. Well, I'm interested in, I mean, I come from the arts, and so I'm interested in media per se, sort of the how we make things and what are the functions of those things. And so I teach game design and I teach interaction design, and my interests are sort of in the place where we perform values in contrast to, let's say, how we experience media, in contrast to what technology does to us, right? So technology has a kind of ideology. It's not a neutral thing. It has its own agenda. Games, I think, have this sort of interesting place within the media world, that you sort of, we read books and we inhabit the world of others. We see movies and we project ourselves into the role of what we see, but we perform games. And so games are actually sort of a place where I think, in the way that I like to think about games, of course, there's many different examples of all of those media, but the way that I think about games is that we perform the roles and we have some agency. So we could play Monopoly and we can play the landlord in lots of different ways, and it becomes a kind of theatrical stage that we can use to express our own values. And so I think when we talk about games in relationship to sustainability and other values that we might hold, I think there's a space there that's really interesting. And I think a lot of times the games that are the most interesting in terms of sustainability are not necessarily the ones that are trying to teach us anything about sustainability. They're just values that are embedded in it. So Firewatch, for example, requires you at one point in the game to pick up some cans to find out, to drive the plot.
Yeah.
Then that requirement goes away, but most people continue to pick up cans for the entirety of the game. So it's taught you a behavior that is not a winning condition. It's just a behavior that you begin to embody in the game. So I think in that sense, it's a really interesting proposition to sort of think about, well, how do we socialize ourselves into values? How do we perform values in games without that becoming the express purpose of something?
Oh, okay.
I worked with Lonnie on, I've been running game jams at SustainEastBay, I think since 2011 or something, I think pretty early on. And then I think in 2015 or 16, I want to say, Lonnie and I worked on a board game hackathon where we basically upcycled old board games into new board games.
From their source,
And
yeah.
that was sort of, and so I think it was a really specific idea of like the thematic was sustainability, but also the practice or the construction was a sustainable practice, right? So it wasn't about throwing new technology with Coltran chips that are extracted by child labor right? Like we looked at what was around and sort of gave things that were incomplete a new life, so that we wouldn't lose those pieces. So I think that's sort of I would say that's my role, or that's part of what I do at Cassis. I have a couple other.
Yeah, no, you had a large contribution too, especially since as a freshman, you left a big impression, a big fun impression with the game jam. So I appreciate you with
Cool.
those events. Yeah. Also, speaking of winning, we just won the first round. Um, we just won the first round, and I was very surprised that you guys made
won
it
the first
through
round?
here. We are one of we voted the imposter already.
Oh, wow. That doesn't happen often.
That was kind of quick. So who was Eagle Eye again? Was that? I forgot which one of us is Eagle Eye, but you guys are quick. I thought it was gonna take us like 30 minutes of, just working on the game. Wow. All right. What was the question again, Sharon?
I was just asking who won. And I was just
Mhm.
asking who won. Professor Brooks, what about you? What do you do on campus? And tell us more about how you think your work relates to sustainability.
Yeah, I have to say, working with Ian with game jams has been phenomenal in terms of bringing issues of Afrofuturism into play. So we did a game jam that was called Minority Reports, envisioning social justice in the future and what that looked like. Using the metaphor, if you've seen the movie with Tom Cruise, Minority Report, it looks at alternative, like the Minority Report is the crucial part of the movie where it looks into the future of anticipating pre-crime. But that's a whole other tangent. But the point was how do we envision alternative memories of the future to heal trauma too? And that's part of what my research is about, and part of why I think how that embeds sustainability into gaming by healing collective and individual trauma. So that's really part of where I see games as healing mechanisms. Among Us is interesting too. The thrill of collective discovering the imposter.
Yes. And you guys are getting the hang of it.
But I want to say that I'm also a research affiliate with the Institute for the Future, and I have developed a game out of initial research with Dr. Pollock called Afro Rhythms from the Future.
Oh, nice.
And it's really an imagination celebrating BIPOC imagination too, but actually kind of shift. So it's a take on algorithm. So it's like Afro Rhythm, RITHMS. So how do we recreate the algorithms from an Afrocentric and BIPOC perspective? Literally changing our gaze and reframing the game so that we have those perspectives in mind as we're actually building algorithms, at Google and other places. How do we make sure that they embed, Black, Indigenous, and people of color perspectives? So that's what we're doing. So I'm actually involved in a project at Google called the Vitality Lab, where they're trying to measure vitality and in terms of well-being for people. So that's an exciting part of what I'm working on right now. Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh wow, I want to play again.
Yeah, no, yeah. You guys are just really good at finding imposters. Yeah, Sharon?
I was gonna ask. I saw that on Twitch, someone did the players win again, or was it the imposter?
Players.
Players won again. I don't know what I did tell you guys, but I got killed both times. This is the only person that's been killed so far.
Oh no.
I don't know how, but I keep guessing the imposter. I don't.
Dang, he has that luck. We have to follow what he says now.
I
He's
don't
a prophecy.
How do I get back into the game? Or I see myself in the room, but not in the main room. Oh no, here we go.
Oh, there
gotcha.
we go.
I think you're good. Yeah, I think you're good. Very good.
I
Okay.
definitely just saw Adrian join, so watch your back.
No. Yeah, watch your back.
Hmm. Yeah,
While
I'm
we get
just.
the game started, Patrick, why don't you tell us more about what sustainability means to you and how it relates to your line of work here on campus?
So one of my big parts of my role is event planning. And I would say SustainEastBay has been very helpful with this, as well as the Wizards. I forget what's the full name of
Waste
the
Wizards, yes.
Waste, because they show up and help students figure out how to use all the recycling bins and the trash bins and things like that and sort different things, which has been really helpful. And it's also been something to keep in mind for me when I'm, like when I get food for events and things like that is like, well, how am I making that sustainable? How are people eating the food? What's left over? What types of materials are being used? And I'll be honest, I'm not always the best at that, but it is something that I keep in mind. It is something that I try to challenge myself with. And then let's see, that's kind of like the big one is the events piece. And then I guess in regards to like leadership and things like that, is like sustainable leaders. I know, like for instance, we have an award that we give out, the Solar Awards, for a sustainable leader, and I know that was something that we did with Jillian to recognize leadership in regards to that because we do find it to be an important topic. To be using resources in a way that. And so yeah, I think that's kind of the basics of what I think sustainability for me is a balance, is like,
Right.
if I'm going to use them, like that's probably the way that I kind of see it the most is just like balancing what I use and utilize as well as, is this available? Is this something that is really going to be helping the environment or our world, or is it not? Because I have to find something else, to use or utilize. Anyways, I'm like distracted playing the game and talking at the same time. So I'm doing my best and I'm reading notes.
And you're reading notes.
The person who killed me, that's the imposter, right?
Yes, but you can't say who.
I
You
can't
can't
say
say who, yeah. So,
I
and
just-
original etiquette in this game is we should mute ourselves, but since this is a panel, we'll just be talking, so. Oh shoot, who are we voting? I'm gonna skip out. I don't know who, so I'm gonna skip out. And also the imposters and the crewmates, they don't know. They don't know unless the people who passed away do. And the imposter would have to lie. They would have to be charismatic, so yes. But Kendrick, feel free to keep answering questions that is not involving your murder for the panel.
How do you finish your task? I don't know how to
Run, everybody.
Can you all see me as a ghost?
No, we can't see you.
Oh, that's funny.
The funny feature about this game is only ghosts, like people who passed away, who are eliminated, can see you. So only ghosts can see other ghosts. Yes.
That's hilarious.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You had a question about finishing tasks. Don't we click the map in the top right?
Yes, you click on the map on the top right just to...
Oh.
On the top right, and you would see yellow exclamation marks and circles. And those are areas where you have to go and complete your own tasks, which is kind of like your own little chore in the game.
Because you're a ghost, now you can float through walls, so in a way, it's kind of like an advantage.
Uh-oh.
Who's an admin? Somebody killed Adrian and admin.
There, I can't click on a map. But I was going to go to navigation. I was on my way to my navigation. Who found a body?
I did.
Huh. Sarah, looks like you're not dead.
I'm just out here trying to complete my tasks.
I don't know, Sarah. I mean, you're always the one being killed, so when you're not being killed...
It is suspicious that I didn't get dead this time.
Wait.
Sarah.
I don't even know who to vote for.
Yeah, this is the fun of the game. It's kind of like murder mystery. Who are you voting for? Who was everyone else voting for? And when you're voting for someone, just click on a name and then who you vote for.
A tie.
Oh, and if it's a tie, no one gets quote-unquote ejected. No one gets eliminated out of the spaceship. So
Hmm.
you see, and slowly it's gonna be one by one. So you have to be very careful. You gotta, yeah, trust no one. Yeah. What was the next follow-up question, Sharon, for the panel?
Kenrick, what what does sustainability mean to you, and how do you think it relates to your line of work?
You know, yes, I'm not on mute. Sustainability for me is, it's something that occurs in every aspect of your life, I think, personal, professional lives that you're creating processes or a lifestyle that um, allows you to live longer, live healthier, and taking into account your surroundings, the earth, all of that, right? For me, that's what that means to me. And, I apply that every day in what I do because I'm always trying to create sustainable practices in my work for my
Ah,
staff, for my students.
wait,
What,
who's
did
that?
someone die?
Yes.
I just
Oh.
saw somebody use the vents.
um,
Where is it?
for me in the unions, we have so many events. We typically have a lot of events during the year, and um, working with Jillian when I think it was what 2 or 3 years ago when we got. And Jillian's been amazing for this campus when it comes to sustainable practices and promoting that and actually doing work around that. And so we work to get all of the trash cans in our facilities. And we probably have a lot of trash that gets created from our events that I have to admit we assume is being properly taken care of, not necessarily me knowing that for sure. I assume that the campus is doing what they're supposed to. Um, and then with Basync, I think it allows for a lot of amazing things to happen on campus around sustainability practices. About oh, we won.
Right. No, you guys were just too quick.
With helping with communication. Hopefully, it knocks down the amount of flyers that are on campus that
Right.
folks have have seen and or in the past and so forth, and it allows for quite a few opportunities for communication to be looked at in a very different way than it used to. Communication and advertising to be looked at in the way it used to.
Beautiful, beautiful answer. And yeah, but I mean, communication is very important when you're trying to leave a big impact on campus. Also, who was the player who was playing the astronaut suit white?
That was me.
Okay, just want to give context to everyone who didn't know, but when I was the imposter, I was venting right in front of him and I was trying to actually kill him, and I kept misclicking eliminate him until I was able to, and he was so close to run away. So close.
And then you went and vented right in front of me.
And yeah,
It was your
and
big mistake. I think we are still waiting on Kenrick and
Oh,
Ian.
What's that? Oh, the game.
Yeah.
all right, Sharon with the next question. There's also a question from the chat too that I'm noticing, so feel free to follow the prompts.
There is a question in the chat. They're asking, do you think technology will play a larger role in how we move to be a more sustainable world now that we've lived through a worldwide pandemic and practically lived a year online?
Well, I want to say from a student perspective, the cost of gas for sure. I mean, the going out in a car kind of decreases, but then again, I'm not the one driving, but I am the one also postmating. So, um, the other panelists can go ahead with a much more accurate answer.
Well, I think what I would say is that we know that personal transportation is one of the biggest producers of global carbon, right? So the reduction of that is profound. But I would say that maybe even more so than personal transportation, it's actually air traffic and global traffic, right?
Right.
Industrial transportation, and so there's sort of I think that there's a trade-off there because we consume these devices, right? Like we use these devices, and they're one-way tickets, right? Like every one of these cell phones has some rare earth from Africa that is unreclaimable, and it's
Oh,
running
wow.
out. So Coltran, for example, right? Like that's one of the big pieces there, and lithium is the other one, right? I mean, there was that famous Elon Musk quote, right? That like sort of like we can invade Bolivia for the lithium if we want to, right? I mean,
Oh,
that's
wow.
sort of there are conversations around certain kinds of precious metals that we sort of they're hidden in these things that we use to offset ground transportation, which are not necessarily free. So I think that sometimes we don't think about sustainability in terms of debt that we move into the future,
Right.
right? So just because we're living better or less impactful doesn't necessarily mean that we're not leaving a bigger debt for future generations. And I think that that's sort of an important conversation within that. So I think the pandemic was bad because it isolated us locally, and and we didn't travel very much. So I think that if you uncouple those two, then you have some other options, right? Because you have to build more local communities so that you don't just go crazy. Because I think that all these virtual relationships are very thin. They're not
Oh,
very thick personal connections, right? Like your social connections over these media, I think, are not so rich. One of the things that really stood out for me in terms of this pandemic is that the moment you get off a Zoom call, you hit a button that says leave, and now you're back into your isolated space, or in a lot of ways. So you don't have this period where you're leaving somebody after you've met with them. So there isn't a transition between being with people and not being with people. And I
right.
actually think that that's a really weird change in the way that we are social with each other. Because normally, like I met somebody for a hike on Saturday and I walked away, and as I'm walking away, I have the ability to think about what just happened. If you disconnect a phone call, you're suddenly just back in whatever that space was that you had before.
Right.
And I think for some people that space is very problematic. And so campus actually becomes a social space that is really important for some people.
Excellent answer. I think going back to from my own point of view, I would say yes for technology playing a larger role in how we move in the sustainable world. Mostly because more people are online shopping, and because of this, I noticed like a lot of excessive packaging. And besides computer hardware wise, I think people are gonna be more environmentally conscious with what packaging you can ship over the trucks and the airplanes that are much more recyclable and more of paper products rather than having like excessive plastic packaging. So I think that would be for my answer how technology would help with sustainability ever since the pandemic at the stay home regulations.
Building off of that, how do we think the world's going to change in like what the world's going to look like in 5 years, in 10 years?
Ooh.
It's a great question.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Yeah, I think well, I think work is going to change, right? And there's more ability now for folks to work from home, but the allure of the city is still remaining. So so I think people will want to be with each other,
Yeah.
and I think so. I think, but there will be spaces of virtual reality that will expand. I'm part of a world right now called Afterville 2028 that looks at how um, it's an imaginary world where it imagines the U.S. differently based on bioregions. So it's about sustainability actually,
Oh, wow.
and building a whole new settlement based on ecological and um, social justice values. So it's kind of an opportunity to experiment in that world. So I wonder, how it will be built out and how it will affect our world, our embodied world too. So I just got the Oculus Quest, and I never thought I would buy it in my life, but for doing this research, I'm doing it. So I don't know. I think I have cautious optimism, but I think there's still a lot of really embedded things that we need to
Take
do.
an account,
So
right?
to take into account. I mean, I'm buoyed by the optimism of this 1.9 trillion stimulus that for the first time gives annual income to families with kids. So up to $300 will be given to kids through 17, and that's been unprecedented. So how can we create, and maybe there'll be more systems of reparations and guaranteed annual income that will occur because of this, and it might have just been killed. But anyway,
No, you're fine.
so that's part of what I'm looking at.
Nobody's dead yet.
Oh,
This is strange.
Unless Kenrick is.
I called the meeting because I couldn't find any dead bodies, and I was like, "What's going
Yes.
on?"
So it's either someone new or someone that we. Hey,
It could be me.
it could not be me. I was just looking at everyone else to make sure they weren't
Playing the
the
long game.
imposter. Okay, we're playing long game, but the imposter needs to be very careful. Also, if anybody's new to the game who doesn't know how to play imposter, don't worry. Don't worry. Just call yourself out and that will help you. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, no, that's a great answer. What would be like the solid picture though of what would you see? Because I really do hope that there will be technology enough to help low income families that are better ways for creating a safer environment. What would be like the solid picture that you would like to see?
I'm not sure that technology is the answer. I think that
Hmm.
that's the ideology of technology, is to say that we're the answer, right?
Right.
So we're gonna keep consuming electricity, and we're gonna build giant scrubbers. So we're gonna use technology to clean up technology. And I think that sustainability, the problem of sustainability, is not a problem of technology. It's a problem of attitude, of ideology. It's how we use what we have, right?
Right.
So I think the problem is not a technological problem. I think that if you're a technologist, every problem is solved with technology. But I think that sustainability is not an issue of technology. It is an issue of how we think about the place that we inhabit,
Right.
and how we think about the debt to future generations, right? So I think that everything we have right now, right? We don't need a new piece of technology to dramatically change everything about the planet we live on right now. All we need to do is we need to make a decision that there's a global crisis, it's a global emergency, and we need to start behaving that way, right? That's Greta Thunberg's point, right? Like,
Oh, great.
uh, uh, right? Like it's not about GE stop making gas cars in 2035. It's too late. The point is today I don't drive anymore. Like
Right.
this day, and my social relationships change so that I don't have to do that, and my work relationships change so that I no longer have to do that. And I think about what I consume in my environment without having it shipped from without having vegetables shipped from Ecuador, right? I mean,
Right. Yeah.
Chinese products with with tankers, right? With freight cargo. I mean, it's ironic that, I think by some calculations, for example, you could make an argument that having something shipped to you from China via one of those enormous cargo ships has a lower carbon footprint than having something transported from Napa to your home, right? Because the offset of a giant ship and what it uses in terms of carbon is perhaps less than the truck that is used to drive something from the cabbage from Napa. But in a global picture, there's another calculation that has to be made, right? Which has to do about what does it mean to look at local production, local economy, and local ecosystems. So I think that there's sort of, it's not a technology problem. It's an ideological problem. It's like, how do we perceive sustainability? How do we perceive global warming, and how urgent do we think it is?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say. So 5 years from now, I mean, Lonnie is the future guy, right? But I think you sort of talk about the cone of possibilities, and then sort of the likelihood of things happening. And I think those are all the how you look at that cone of possibility really depends on what the guiding ideology is that you sort of consult, right? Like, what are the signals that you're looking at? So some people will say, oh, technology, we're all going to be virtually attending meetings, and therefore we don't drive as much. But we don't think about this, the product renewal cycle of all of those devices that we're using to connect online. The electricity that's being used to power those devices, right? So it's not necessarily the solution, I would say.
And just I got a little note for myself too. It also depends on breaking the bystander effect and taking initiative on your own. That really helps everything out.
And maybe the last thing I would say, sorry, is just that it's not an individual thing. Like, I think actually we can't recycle ourselves out of this solution either.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, we actually have to have national and international policy. Like, otherwise you can't make the changes we need to make. So it's really about like electoral power. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. Yeah. Next one. Yeah.
Oh, no. I mean, I think the future I want to see is where we have more healing processes that are embedded in our policies, like Ian was talking about, like, having models of healing and social support embedded in the policies that we lay out. So people, like essential workers, don't have to work if there's a pandemic, right? That there's ways, or they're protected better than before, because pandemics will reoccur. So, but like 5 years from now, what will it look like? I think, it's going to be similar to like the Roaring 20s. We have this pent up energy. People are going to want to get out and play. They're going to want to celebrate. And I think they're going to be wanting to get together. And, how do we prepare for that in ways that are like healing and self-sustaining and supportive? So like, how do we make sure that we have maybe a model of reparations coming about to support people in their daily lives, even as they might work may shrink because of artificial intelligence, and how do they create other types of more fulfilling pathways? What does the university look like? There's going to be a lot more options, right? Google just came out with certificates as pathways that may help a certain segment of the population that is more vocationally oriented, but then there's other people that want to go deeper in their knowledge too. And also, how do we think about education as a way to train people to really think through futures literacy even? So there's a futures literacy program that's being headed by UNESCO globally to train people on how to anticipate the future. So I think we have a lot to do in terms of like raising people's awareness. But I think, I mean, technology is not going to go away, but how does it become better deployed in the service of healing, restorative, and generative processes?
Right.
So yeah, But I think we're gonna. Yeah, I think cities are gonna make a comeback that's maybe perhaps more generative in healing and restorative than before. So that's what I'd like to see.
And just to, again, these great responses can remind me of an issue that I see back at home. I live in Southern LA, and it's like a bit dangerous. But ever since my high school created a restorative urban garden, urban farm for vegetables and local produce, it has been healing my neighborhood. So I think I would say that's a little example to what he said.
What about you,
Initiatives.
Patrick or Kenrick? Where do you guys think we should be prioritizing developments to create a more sustainable world?
I definitely think our technology, I think, well, I think there's a variety of different things. Honestly, I think our community is broken in so many different ways, and there's so much that needs to be done to when I look at how the United States in particular um, responded to this pandemic, and just the rationalization behind some people. I think education is key. I was just watching this clip this morning of this woman who doesn't believe that the pandemic exists, and
Oh
it's
my.
just it's bullshit like that. That is just crazy. That I mean, how do you explain 550,000 people in our country dying from something, and you're telling us that they magically died? How do you
Yeah,
not
exactly.
believe this? How do you, your idea that the entire world got together to plan this secret thing or whatever to just ruin everybody is just ridiculous, or ruin your president, is just beyond ridiculous. So I think education is key. I don't know how we got to this place of conspiracy theorists ruling our world. It's beyond belief. I think technology um, has a huge part in that, and social media was allowed to, and it's tough because I still think that social media technology needs to exist in the free form that it does, but it has to take some responsibility for what it allows uh, out there, because as we can see, it's done some tremendous damage to our society. I mean, the spread of false information has killed thousands upon thousands of people through this pandemic. So things like that, I think, is important to look at. I think government have a huge responsibility in taking care of its people. That's plain and simple. That's the definition of government. Like that's why they exist. And if people don't understand that concept, there's no advancement to your nation, to your existence. So I think this government really needs to look at its practices and what's really important, and where a lot of the wealth is going and how that needs to be redistributed in a proper way.
Right.
I have a question off of that. You talked about social media, and an ad that I've been seeing a lot lately is Facebook saying that the internet should be regulated more accurately to the times. It's basically like all of the internet regulations were created, you know, at the very beginning of the internet, and they haven't changed. Um, and I just think it's crazy. Exactly your point. Like, especially Facebook is a place where all of these conspiracy theories like thrive. Um, yeah, I had a question in there. I forgot exactly what it was, but that
But
that
why doesn't, but I think it's interesting to ask yourself what kind of regulation Facebook wants, and why, if they say that it's an unregulated space, as one of the biggest companies on the planet on the internet, they're not willing to put money and resources into just fixing their own platform, right? So I think the I think the problem with technology is that they're very happy to be the disruptor, but then
Mm-hmm.
but then they sort of right, meaning that they don't want things to be regulated in order to establish a market share. But then it gets to a certain point, and then they sort of withdraw from this idea when they're being disrupted, and now they're asking for regulation as opposed to regulating it themselves, right? And the people that they have, the few people that they have that are content moderators, if you read their interviews, right, they suffer from PTSD because of the stuff that they're sort of filtering out at this point, right? So I think there's some disingenuous effort there in terms of kind of what they're doing, right? Unlike, for example, Twitter, who's building, right? They're building a sort of Wikimedia model of crowdsourced verifications. That's sort of their approach to that issue. I think to Kendrick's point, maybe that because we're playing this game, which is in itself a conspiracy theory, right? We are in a conspiracy right now, and we're trying to find the quote unquote truth, and then we vote in terms of who gets ejected and things like that. I think that one way to think about conspiracy theories is that what's so fascinating about QAnon is that the amount of time it takes to research all of the connections, however tangential and manic they seem, it's an extraordinary amount of research that people are doing on their own, on the internet, in this kind of ultimate alternate reality game of global conspiracy, right? And so I think what's interesting about that is to think about people that are deeply invested in that discourse as they're not unlike game players that are playing really complicated versions of Among Us in a way, right? Like there's a joy in finding these connections and sort of playing with these connections. And the collapse of the game space into the real world, I think is sort of the problem there, right? That
Right.
sort of the consequence of the game is the thing that makes you go to the pizza parlor without a basement and say, where are the children in the basement, right? I mean, there's that problem, right? Like that's a real consequence of this thing. So I think it's interesting to think about conspiracy theories in this game space as a game problem. That's what I would say. Maybe. Like it is a game. It's the ultimate game.
The ultimate game, yeah.
And it feels like we're losing.
Well, I mean, maybe the idea that there's a win condition is part of the problem, right? Like,
Yeah.
do you win at life, or I mean, that would be a sort of, I think, thinking that it's not a process, but it's some sort of a thing that ends at a certain point, and then we're happy ever after, right? Like, I feel like that's a little bit of a problem too, right? Like that kind of thinking that like once we solve sustainability, it'll all be solved.
Yeah.
I mean, Paul Virilio sort of has that famous quote, right? The person that invented the ship also invented the shipwreck. So every time we have a new thing, we're also embedded in that new thing is the problem of that new thing. The catastrophe is embedded.
Yeah.
The carbon scrubbers are going to get rid of carbon in the atmosphere, but they're going to do something. There's something in that invention that's going to make us have to work with that, right? Like that'll be the next thing. So.
Right.
I can't get back into our conspiracy here.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah. Somebody
Thank
eliminate
you, Kenrick, for joining us. Also, great game. You just won.
Great game. He did
I
an
don't know how I
excellent
did it,
imposter.
Which is impressive because you killed me in front of Patrick. And
You-
Adrian seemed not to believe it.
I was the first to be eliminated, and he did in front of Patrick, Adrian, Sarah. Like,
I think there was like 4 people in the room. I was like, I don't know what.
and no one.
I didn't notice the
voted
body
him.
at first. Like, I didn't notice your body until I like came up into the room and it said report, and I was like, wait, there's a body there?
Bye. It was fun.
Thank you.
Thank you. Uh,
10 minutes left. I want to be mindful of anyone's time. If you have
Yes.
to, drop off, I think Kenrick and Professor Brooks have office hours and another meeting to go to. I just want to thank you guys for coming, and anyone who also wants to stay on for 10 more minutes, that's awesome. And it was super cool.
Thank you all. It's always great to hear my colleagues and you speaking and hear your ideas. That's a real privilege. And playing this game was a is a good kind of, I love it.
it's pretty fun,
Conspiracies
yeah.
as the ultimate game. That's awesome. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you for joining.
Because it made me start thinking about things that I find important that are a problem that I think really affect, one for me is community. And I think there's a lot of
Community, yep.
like even where I'm at right now, and even a couple of years ago, I would say I felt very disconnected and I didn't know that. Up until recently, I've realized, that I haven't feel connected. And as I find different ways to find connections with people, I started growing into this thing of like, I want to help people more and I actually feel connected. I want to love them more and I want to take care of them and make sure that they have what they need. I never felt like that before. And I think like when I think about also kind of just society is like more and more and more and more, and it's all about me, because that's what it used to be for me. That's kind of like one of the problems that we have in regards is like we in American society, we have this idea is like the more you have, the more, whatever. But I was thinking about just like education as like a piece of that, it's because it starts when we're young.
Really?
It also
Yeah.
even starts with parents, like parental education too, at least like right now it does. We have a new generation coming in that's like learning about these things, and hopefully at some point that becomes a normal, like a normal thing, but I don't know. It's like it does have to start from the top too, of like what that looks like for development, like lifespan development and things like that. So I definitely see that as a problem, and the community development and feeling connected to people to want to like help each other out, That's kind of what it is,
Exactly.
because I never really understood what connection meant until I really like explored it and had to do therapy. And I was thinking of even mental health as like a really big one too, like mental health is really important. And I think a lot of times that could be one of the things too that's like a foundational thing is like I didn't know I was disconnected until I got a therapist and was like, oh, yeah, I need to create a new community for myself and connect to people, and so that's really helpful, a group process or being in things like this to like remind people is like, hey, get connected. Like, what does that mean? Because me as a student engagement coordinator, that's like one of my primary roles. But it's like I didn't even understand that, up until like a couple of years ago. It's like the more we feel connected, the more powerful we can do things, as well as just like each other out. Okay, now I'm rambling, but I think you get the point. Like,
Yeah, none of your fine, yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you for feeling comfortable about especially talking about mental health and your own journey with that. I feel like a lot of people don't it's still such a taboo in society. So thank you for the courage of sharing that information.
Someone discovered Sarah's body.
Yeah.
because it's been life changing. So
Yeah.
When you were saying that, like I had the same discussion with Matt, and I was like literally resonating with what you said about being connected, and I was like, that's literally the conversation I've had before. Sitting with us, crazy.
huge problem.
Yeah. I didn't even know. I like what Professor Brooks is telling us about that healing and regenerative healing and how that has to do with sustainability. I've never thought of it that way before. So it was good to just hear that kind of insight and just open my mind to like, how we can relate this back to sustainability and stuff. It's really cool to see.
Also related a lot with what Professor Pollock was talking about and how like social interactions that we have in technology are so different than from like what we have in person, and how it creates such a different like environment and affects how we connect with others. And just thinking about what it's been like in the pandemic and not having those same like social situations that I've been used to, and then having to rely on technology, which like I never really was super like engaged with like using a lot of social media to talk to people, and I really relied on having like those in-person like engagements, especially like as an athlete and like being involved in team sports and having those environments, whereas like that's primarily not available. And how like how that's a more continuous problem for people not in the pandemic. Like I've been involved, or I'm taking a class, global health and disability, and so it's just like it's brought a different perspective about the barriers that are in place and how technology can't isn't a solution, but that that exists for people on a regular basis.
Right.
Have you guys heard? I'm sure everyone knows about that Mars rover, right? That or the
The
yeah
one
the
that
Mars.
plays like a birthday song on its birthday on the Mars alone.
Yeah,
That
that
one.
Mars rover. But we were talking about how, like, if we're prioritizing technological developments in the right fields, and it just reminded me of like all the stuff that Elon Musk is doing with Tesla and this space stuff, like the people he wants to send out to space and to live on Mars in like 30 years or something. And I just feel like that just creates this gap, right? That's only going to get wider because we haven't fixed any, like, a lot of problems on Earth itself, and now we're like, you know, we're not prioritizing developments in the right fields.
Directions too. Gotcha, gotcha.
There was one question I wanted to ask
Hmm.
in regards to our campus. What do you think East Bay, CSU East Bay should be doing to further sustainability? Like, what would you like to see incorporated on campus, and changes you would like to see?
I think that sort of thinking about right, so thinking about how we get away from the commuter aspect of the campus, right? So the car emissions are a real problem, but I think the lack of community is also a real problem, right? And so I think that thinking about what it means to have a campus community that extends beyond this sort of parking lot, I think is an important piece, right? So there was a last year I was on a commission that looked at housing,
Hmm.
both student and faculty housing. I think that there's a lot of work that could be done there to build something in that way, and then you could offset, right? You could have a carbon-free, like Tuesday and Thursday classes could be virtual, and now you've reduced the amount of traffic to campus by 2 days, right? So like you could make really concrete things without going into a completely online environment where all the social connections sort of implode and you no longer have things like a face-to-face game making event where new relationships form, right? Because I think that personal relationships and face-to-face relationships are really important in our lives. And maybe to Patrick's point, right? I think that part of what technology does is it tries to insert itself into our relationships, right? It becomes the mediator of those relationships. And what happens is that now you're the subject of, you're interpolated through the medium, right? Meaning that like you are as the medium addresses you, right? So for interpolation, like if you walk down the street and a policeman says, "Hey, you're interpolated through that policeman, right? So you begin to think that you're the subject of the police, right? So like all of these emotions come up because of this power relationship. Well, technology
Right.
is much the same way, right? Like a phone addresses you in a certain way that isn't you. It's the phone's image of you. It's the phone's understanding of who you are, which is very different from who you are as an actual human being in
Oh.
relationship to another human being, right? We're all roughly the same size in Zoom. I'm 6'6". If I stand next to you, I'm 2 feet taller, right? Like, so you could say that in a way, maybe it's democratizing because you're not intimidated by my height, right? So there's a concrete example, but we also look in everybody's room, and all of you are privileged enough to live in rooms that look very orderly, nicely organized. You don't have
Hmm.
5 roommates. You all have windows. None of you have bars on your windows, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's lots of these kind of there's lots of stuff in how you get interpolated through these media that are not healthy and not necessarily beneficial to you thriving as a human being. So thinking about how we don't lose that part. That's sort of, I think, the technology danger of it, right? And the presence. We're all playing a game and we're having to try and have a conversation. How much can you really do that? What kind of conversation can you have when you're playing a game, right? Like you can have a casual chat, but can you have this kind of conversation while still playing and be present enough to understand what people are saying?
Right.
Maybe I'm just old. I can't do it.
No.
Like I have, right? There's like people talk about multitasking as opposed to continuous partial attention. I think I find myself living more in a world where it's a request for continuous partial attention as opposed to actual attention. And I think multitasking, scientifically speaking, exists in a very small group of people under a very small set of circumstances. Most of us can't do it. And I think technology, right, because it's driven by advertising and users, demands that you pay attention to it all the time. So I think there's some things that we need to negotiate with the stuff that we have right now, and more technology isn't solving that.
Yeah.
That's what I.
Yeah, I might
That's
have
what I
like
would
a
say.
large disconnect. Yeah.
Definitely has changed my view just having this conversation today. It's like, yeah, it is technology.
But yeah, anyways, this was, I mean, nonetheless, this was fabulous. I had a good time, and I appreciate you putting that all together. And even more than this, I look forward to seeing all of you in the fall in some form on campus.
I do too.
Same here.
Along with sisters.
We'll all be vaccinated and we'll still be wearing masks,
Yep.
but we'll all hang out together.
Making sure that we're also human, you know. Exactly, exactly. That was the last question, right, Sharon?
That was. You can go ahead.
Thank
I'll be
you both for
mindful.
coming and joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm off to
Yeah.
staff meeting right now. So
Yay, you can
yay,
tell them the
staff.
little story.
Well,
Cool. Take care.
well, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Ian. Woo. I will still be live streaming and I will end the live stream with a few, messages. So, Sharon, if you like, you can give a message to our audience.
Of course. So we're almost running out of time here. I've put a plug in for our post-event surveys on the Twitch live stream and the YouTube. We'd love to hear back from you. Tell us what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and what you'd like to see from us. The next Sustain East Bay meeting is this Thursday from 12:15 to 1:15. If you'd like to attend, please be sure to follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to stay updated. The handle for all of those is at SustainEastBay. And we just wanted to thank you all for coming and, give a silent round of applause for our panel that was here today. We were really excited to hear from them, and it was nice to just sit down and talk like this and have a really good, constructive conversation. See you guys at the next meeting or at the next event. Stay safe, everyone.
Giving a shout outs to our essays who are helping with the Twitch. So, yeah, shout outs to Sharon, Sarah, Adrian, Carol, Sandra V, and Nikita for joining today's Twitch live stream. I will end the live stream now. Bye, guys. Stay safe.